Have you ever encountered any paranormal phenomena? One weekend, I was at my father's house. He went upstairs to the bathroom to shave. At that moment, I heard footsteps in my stepsister's room. At first, I thought it was him walking around, but when I stood up, I saw him standing by her door, which was closed. He looked at me and whispered. I nodded. Then he slowly opened the door. My sister was asleep and clearly hadn't woken up. There was no way she could have walked around the room, gone back to bed, and convincingly pretended to be sleeping in just 2 seconds. He entered the room and checked the TV, which was off. It had never been turned on. The TV was very old and would heat up when powered on. The radio was also off. We assumed it might have been a snippet of a song or something similar. After that incident, we heard footsteps several more times, usually early in the morning. Sometimes they were so loud that the ceiling fan in the living room below her bedroom rattled. My sister woke up a few times because of the noise. Additionally, whenever I took a shower at my dad's place, I always felt like someone was standing behind me. Eventually, it became so unpleasant and unsettling that I stopped showering there altogether. I even avoided going into the upstairs bathroom. One day, my dad asked me, "Have you ever felt like someone is always standing behind you in the bathroom?" He asked this after months during which I had experienced that feeling but hadn't told anyone. As a child, when I had a high fever, I would hear a strange voice while delirious from pain. It was a deep male voice counting upward. As the numbers increased, the voice grew louder and tenser. With age, it happened less frequently. Now, I no longer hear it. I dismissed it as some recurring nightmare. However, recently, I learned that my sister experienced the same thing as a child. When I was 3 years old, I told my parents that my great-grandmother came to me in a dream and said her legs no longer hurt. If I recall correctly, she suffered from leg issues due to diabetes or something similar. She passed away that night. My parents received the call shortly after I told them about my dream. It was quite a chilling coincidence. I don't believe in paranormal stuff, but many people consider my grandmother and grandfather's house unlucky. It's part of a Los Angeles ghost tour and, according to legend, inspired the show American Horror Story. There are countless paranormal stories about it, but I'll share one that I personally experienced. It happened when I lived there as a child. I was about 6, and my older sister, who was 12, shared a room with me. Our mom placed an antique phone on our bedside table as a decorative piece. It didn't work and wasn't plugged in. One night, both my sister and I woke up simultaneously and turned toward each other. I remember feeling intense fear right after. The phone, sitting between us, began ringing. We closed our eyes and hid under the covers until it stopped. We thought it was a dream and didn't talk about it for several years. But one day, my sister mentioned the incident, and we realized we had both experienced the same thing. I work at a cemetery. One evening, I stayed late to finish some tasks, photographing granite samples on my phone. I had already locked up and was alone. Suddenly, I heard the basement door swing open, slam shut, and then footsteps ascending the stairs. Thinking someone had entered, I called out, assuming it was a coworker, but there was no response. I listened carefully, then called out again. Still silence. Finally, I mustered the courage to peek outside. No one was there. I checked the basement. It was empty. All doors were locked. Near our old family home was a large ravine. I slept on the first floor, and my room was at the back of the house. For 5 years, 4 times, I saw a middle-aged man in a flannel shirt, blue jeans, and a red cap walk past my window holding a dog leash. Each time, he paused briefly in the same spot, looked around, and continued toward the ravine. The house was relatively new, located in a suburban area surrounded by dense forest before construction. I think this man once lost his dog in the ravine and has been searching for it ever since. Similar stories make me think that any paranormal phenomenon is simply an event from a past timeline that somehow loops in a specific location. Such events occur randomly, like this man searching for his dog. For instance, here I am sitting on the couch writing this comment on Reddit. Perhaps in 100 years, someone will witness an echo of me doing exactly this. In my mom's old apartment, I constantly felt like someone was watching me. Later, I started waking up at 3 a.m. repeatedly. One night, I woke up and heard someone calling my name. It was a female voice, unfamiliar to me. She kept calling my name, getting closer and closer to my bed, though I couldn't see anyone. Terrified, I jumped out of bed and ran to my brother's room. I climbed into his bed and tried to wake him, but he slept like a log and still does. I even heard footsteps following me to his door. After that, every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I'd rush to his room and sleep on the top bunk of our bunk beds. My mom still doesn't believe anything paranormal happened to me. Luckily, we only lived there for a couple of months before moving out. When I was 6, I slept alone in a room with a bunk bed. The bottom bunk was empty, intended for my younger brother, but he was too scared to sleep alone. One night, I woke up shivering but then suddenly felt very warm, probably because I had a nightmare. I started breathing heavily, opened my eyes, and saw an empty room. The small night light in the corner calmed me down, and I fell back asleep. But when I closed my eyes again, I felt a heavy hand stroking my shoulder. I opened my eyes, but the room was empty. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the same sensation. Eventually, I covered my head with a blanket and imagined it was my mom. Because of this experience, for the next 12 years, I slept with my head under the blanket. Later, I found out that my mom knew someone had died in that apartment before we moved in. She believes it might have been that woman trying to comfort me. One night, I woke up and glanced at my phone to check the time. As I was about to lie back down, I suddenly looked ahead and saw a massive humanoid figure. This shadow blocked the view of the walls and clock. Panicked, the figure remained there for a moment, but when I briefly looked away, it vanished. In high school, during summer break, I visited my best friend's grandparents in a Japanese village. They put me in their daughter's old room, which had a small wall cabinet. On the upper part of the cabinet was a tiny door about 45 centimeters tall and 90 centimeters wide. The design seemed odd, but I didn't give it much thought since the house was very old. Due to the significant time difference, I suffered from jet lag for the first couple of weeks. Also, because of Japan's hot and humid climate, I couldn't fall asleep at night. Whenever the lights were off, I felt uneasy, mostly because of that little space in the cabinet, which seemed darker than the rest of the room. Toward the end of the second week, I adjusted to the time difference. One morning, I woke up and noticed the little door was open. I felt uneasy but closed it, thinking it might not have been fully shut and swung open. A few nights later, I woke up with a strong sense of anxiety. It was dark, but I could make out shapes. I saw that the small door was open, and the space inside was pitch black. This was the first and only time I experienced sleep paralysis. I was too terrified to move or speak. I only felt the darkness emanating from it. I don't remember falling asleep that night, but I do remember waking up the next morning. I told my friend about it, and he said his mom had mentioned something similar. When I returned home, I talked to his parents, and his mom jokingly said, "I heard you've already met the ghost. Thank you for watching." In the comments below, please share any paranormal experiences you've had, and don't forget to check out our other videos.